the partnership has always established that place is the fundamental building block for population health, for tackling inequalities, and for collaborative working. And therefore, I think that's where we should start the conversation. We need to understand our conversations and our efforts through the lens of place, I think, and therefore this initial topic is absolutely appropriate, I think. When I started as the chair of the partnership, I think probably the most striking gap I came across was between what the partnership said about place and what it did about place. And I want to make it clear that's not a commentary on places. We'll see later some of the amazingly effective, integrated, coordinated work going on in places. I'm talking about the relationship between the partnership and places and the necessity of improving that. And this assembly is designed to be a contribution to improving that, and the partnership being of more support, of more use to places. So the assembly has two main roles. The first is to hold the partnership board to account. And again, I'll say more about that and illustrate, but one of the things we're going to be doing over the autumn is reviewing the programs to test them against their alignment with the objectives and mission of the partnership. And the next partnership assembly will be able to look at that and hold the partnership board, who will have developed that and be setting about approving it, and will be able to hold the board to account on that issue. So that's the first role of the assembly, to hold the board to account. The second is, I think, to create and nurture the setting within which the partnership operates. And I think that's what today's about. That's the contribution that I hope between us we'll be able to make by the end of this morning. That's by way of introduction. Thanks again for joining us. Really appreciate it. I'll hand over to Robert, who's going to facilitate our morning for us.
Thank you very much indeed, Alan, and very good to see so many of you here today. I'm just going to take us quickly through the agenda. And because, of course, this is inevitably an online meeting, there's just a few kind of tech points to run through as well. So let's have the next slide, and I can talk you through the agenda for today. So in a second, we'll return to Alan, and he'll take us through an overview of the partnership, looking at what it's there for, some of its terms of reference, some of the architecture, and so on. Then there'll be a Q&A with everybody on the call. We'll be using the chat function that many of you are already using there, so that Alan and Jackie can see those comments and questions as they come in, and I can also pick some out for them too. We've then got a section of about 20 minutes where we have what we're calling stories from places, and this is a kind of a montage of videos that have been sent in from the 9 different places to give you a feel for what's going on in those particular localities. I will then give a little bit of feedback from some pre-work that we did. Alan mentioned Andy's work with the place leads, gathering thoughts from across the patch really on questions and concerns. So I'll feed those to Alan and Jackie, and they'll respond and may draw others in as we go through that. At 11:30, we have the high stakes moment in any virtual meeting where we go into breakout sessions. We'll have 9 breakout sessions running in parallel, all asking answering the same question: what has to happen now to make places work at their best? You'll be randomly allocated into those groups because we wanted to get a nice mix of people from different places and functions and so on. They'll be facilitated by one of those 9 place leads, and they'll be feeding back to me via a separate WhatsApp channel on what's coming out of those discussions, which I'll then play back around about 12 o'clock into the main room, as it were, for again Alan and Jackie to respond to and draw others in. Before we finish, I want to draw your attention to this now, so perhaps you can already start thinking about this. At the end, we're going to invite you to complete 2 sentences, I guess. What I can do for my place is, or places, and what I need from other partners is. I'll put those sentences, the beginning of those sentences, in the chat box, and we'll just hear from you in the chat, the written chat, how you'd respond to each of those 2 questions. So perhaps you can have those in mind as we're going through, because there will be something to come back to towards the end. We'll finish obviously with Alan taking us through next steps and aim to finish by 12:30. On the next slide, I just want to remind you of some of the kind of basic protocol, I guess, for online meetings. I'm sure many of you have done many online meetings, and apologies if this is going over familiar territory. But just to say, the event is being recorded. You can probably see a red light flashing at the top of your screen, just saying it's recording, so we're live in that sense too, so that it can be returned to for people who weren't able to attend, or you can go back and watch content that you may have an interest in seeing again. Typical online protocol, just please remain on mute, except in those breakout sessions, or perhaps if Alan or Jackie kind of draw you into the group conversation, so try and keep yourself muted. And again, please use the chat box for comments and questions. That's the written chat, which you can bring up by clicking on the chat icon, which looks like a quote bubble, I guess, at the bottom of your screen. We're going to go straight through to 12:30 because it's a kind of virtual meeting. It's kind of at your discretion if you need to take a break or whatever it is. You can just do that as and when you need to. And finally, a little bit of apocalypse now here. If there is any kind of tech fail or a security issue of any kind, it's very unlikely, of course, but if it does happen, what we'll do, we'll just end the meeting immediately so there's no potential breach or whatever, and then immediately email you a new Zoom link. So it's very unlikely to happen, but if we, for whatever reason, have to hit that button, that's what will happen. We'll end the meeting. You'll get another email link, and you can rejoin. So that is it in terms of protocol and the agenda. I hope that works for you all. And without further ado, then I'll bring you back in, Alan, if that's okay. And you're going to talk us through a kind of overview of the partnership. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Robert. Let me say at the outset, this is very much an overview, and I'm very aware that we're a very mixed audience. Some of us are actually very steeped in the partnership working that's going on in places and in the partnership, and others, and very welcome guests who are less involved in it. But one of the things I will be illustrating, I hope, is we would like you to be more in it over time. What I'm going to say is quite a distillate, the concepts, positioning. It's not the memorandum of understanding in detail or anything like that. I just want to communicate the general issues about the partnership, just to give us a common starting place to enable us to be orientated in a similar way to the work of the partnership. Before I do that, I just wanted to say one thing. It will become clear through what I'm about to say that the partnership is very much an organisation determined to tackle inequalities. I wanted to draw attention at the outset to the partnership statement about improving equality, diversity, inclusion, particularly for Black, Asian and minority ethnic staff and their communities. If you've accessed already the microsite, you may have found the statement the partnership has made. We make important pledges in there, but the important part is that we do things, but that we are something. And the partnership is absolutely determined to be one that's a core issue for the partnership, is about improving equality, diversity and inclusion for our Black, Asian and minorities staff and communities. And please have a look at that. It's part of who we are. I was talking to some colleagues earlier this week. They were CCG colleagues, and we were talking about, we come from so many different environments and traditions and the agreed language we have in places that quite often we can manage a misunderstanding simply because we use words in a different way. So please forgive me if I start with this. And next slide, please, Izzy. It's a glossary of terms, and I'll try and bring it a little bit more to life than it might appear. But I suppose it's really quite important that we understand what we mean. So place, It has been agreed by the partnership that we have 9 places. They are based on local authority boundaries. And place for me is where local meets strategic. That is, it's a significant population to enable population health approaches to work, and for there to be shared effort and planning and strategy and so on around that. But it's still sufficiently local to be meaningful and sensitive to local needs. That's where I think we find that sweet spot between scale and the benefits of that and localism. But the important point is we have determined previously that we have 9 places. They are based on local authority boundaries. Another thing that happens in that sometimes unshared language, we talk about the partnership. And we can mean one of 3 or 4 things when we talk about the partnership. So this slide tries to unpick that a little bit. And so the partnership technically is this collection of bodies: 9 local authorities, 9 CCGs, 19 provider trusts, including the North West Ambulance Service, which covers greater than Cheshire and Merseyside, Voluntary Services North West, and then the partnership executive is included in that, as well as the partnership assembly. So that is the partnership, if you like. And it's worth noting, I've never seen the evidence that supports this. I'm always told that Cheshire and Merseyside is the 2nd biggest in the country. I still haven't found the evidence that makes that true. It's certainly, every time I talk to other colleagues, more complicated, with 9 local authorities, 9 CCGs, and 9 provider trusts, as well as our other very welcome partners. So that's the partnership. We also talk about the system. And as language I tend not to use, but there's language around talking about system by default. And that is all of those bodies that may have an interest, impact, or influence on the health and well-being of the population. Deliberately, it says including PCNs there, primary care networks. Primary care networks are really important, and I think and are largely coterminous with what we call neighbourhoods inside places. It's my ambition that primary care networks become part of the partnership rather than part of the wider system. But there are also other very significant contributors. One example would be local enterprise partnerships that we would wish to progressively regard as part of the partnership rather than part of the wider system. The partnership assembly is what we're at in this meeting, and senior stakeholders, equivalent to shareholders, if you like, who hold the partnership board to account, as I said before, but also provide the context in which the board works. We are that community of interest, and therefore our ability to provide that context to the work of the whole partnership is really important. There is a partnership board, and you'll see later in the slides a bit more detail. But if you like, the partnership board is the authority of the partnership. It's the board that is able to make decisions on behalf of the partnership. And that's when I'm called chair of the partnership, that's the fundamental thing I'm chair of. And then there's a partnership executive, which has seen 2 recent new appointments. One, our very own Sarah O'Brien, who's been appointed as Director of Strategy and System Development, a really welcome appointment, especially Sarah's background with knowledge of local authorities and commissioning will be a great contributor. And that team's led by Jackie, and you'll see Jackie a little bit in a short while. Next slide, please, Izzy. So those are our 9 places. And we'll know either one of the places we're in or several of those places, but we know they're really quite different. And it's obvious from that map and our knowledge of those places why local sensitivity is needed. There is not a one size fits all. There are things we can do together across the partnership that will be beneficial to those populations. There are synergies and benefits from working together, but we also very much need to reflect the local sensitivities. There are differences in population, health status, inequality gradient. One of the things that's said quite often is about the levels of deprivation in the Liverpool City region. It's very distinctly noticeable that in Cheshire East and Cheshire West there are significant levels of deprivation, and quite often the deprivation gradient, the inequality gradient in those places is steeper. You will have seen too that in the background reading, there's a statement about the health status of the population, helpfully contributed by our public health colleagues, and thank you to them for those. Next slide, please. So that's something in the context. This is what we are about. The vision of the partnership. We want everyone in Cheshire and Merseyside to have a great start in life, get the support they need to stay healthy and live longer. Now, that could be a motherhood and apple pie, but I hope you'll see later on, we're trying to turn that into meaningful notions, which will turn into criteria, which will be the way we judge our work and our effectiveness. We'll tackle health inequalities and improve the lives of the poorest fastest. That's the inequality statement. I'm passionately committed to that. And we believe we can do our best by working in partnership, both in places and across the partnership. I just wanted to draw greater attention on this slide to the aims, improving the health and well-being of local people. And that inevitably turns not only to health services, but to the wider determinants of health. And that's why we need partnership to pull all of those contributors to the wider determinants of health to work together to enable health improvement. And that's our fundamental commitment. Moving to pursue a less illness-based and more health and well-being model, getting on the front foot rather than being reactive. Providing better joined-up care and closer to home. And this happily gives me a really nice opportunity to congratulate NHS Cheshire, CCG and Cheshire and Wirral Partnership. They've recently received a Health Service General Award, you may have seen, for mental health service redesign. And what has happened there, and the work that all the partners in the area, it's the Health Service Journal Award. I think Cheshire CCG and the partnership have received that award, but I'm sure they regard it on behalf of the whole system, the place systems and colleagues and so on. But a really good example of those aims being fulfilled. So congratulations to them. But also it helps me make an important point about the partnership. The partnership has to be additional. It has to add added value. It's not sufficient for it to take credit for somebody else's work in a place or across a county like Cheshire. Next slide, please. Here's a little bit of the machinery. It starts with patients and the public, and the interaction between the services, the partner organisations and the places. And the partnership executive is the one, the body that pulls those things together. I hope you'll see on the next slide, and I won't go in this in any detail, you'll be relieved to know, the interrelationship between the various parts of the organisation and what they do. This is all on the microsite, and the microsite is intended to be a reference point for those of us who belong to the Assembly. What we're trying to do is find the pertinent papers that will be helpful to partners without you having to search across the whole of the website, which has got a lot of other interesting stuff on, but we need to distill it a little bit. So you'll find that and that detail of who's on what there, and better description. But I wanted to major on the next slide. We need to make sure that we measure what's important to us rather than make important what we can easily measure. So some of these things are really quite difficult to measure, and we have a challenge doing it. But if we start to measure these things, not only will we discover whether we're doing the right things that contribute to progress on here, but we'll also be able to determine by what criteria we should judge what priorities we should have, what programs we should run, and so on. So these will prove to, in certain instances, be quite tough questions and quite determining questions about whether something's a priority or not, whether it's a priority for the partnership rather than a place or an organisation. And we are talking about the partnerships work here rather than those organisations. So how far is people's health improving? And that's a fundamental aim, that it must be so. But how are we adding value? You know, adding value, not just taking credit for somebody else's value and so on. But how are we learning? But also we can't just say this is nothing to do with the current circumstances as well. And therefore, in the current circumstances, particularly via the coordination group, I think we are having an impact on shared endeavour around COVID-19 as well. So I'll wrap up in a moment, but just let me return on the next slide to the Partnership Assembly. And we formed a design group for this meeting, representatives from a variety of sectors. And one of the things we asked is, what do you think the Assembly should be for? What contributions can it make? And these were the things that came out of that. A democratic forum for the partnership, a place where you can have your say and be heard. Find representation of the wider Cheshire and Mersey communities, so not just the organisations that are partners and their leaders, but the wider community. And I think I'm very encouraged by the attendance today and the mixture of attendance, because it contributes to that wider thing. Holding the partnership board to account, a little bit difficult yet, but as we move on, you know, the plan is for the Assembly to meet 3 times a year. As we move on, there will be greater and greater opportunity for the Assembly to hold the partnership board to account. Critique is a decision-making process. So we want to develop criteria for determining what our programme should be, which priorities we have. There will be opportunity in future partnership assemblies to discuss those criteria and critique them and offer a wider view than has been applied to them. Insist on transparency, blow the whistle as necessary, put the public good first, and sort of holding our feet to the fire on that. And that can be summed up as act as the conscience of the partnership. So I hope you'll see from that that we don't think the partnership is a sort of voluntary, shall we just get together, wouldn't it be nice? I hope you'll see that we are proposing to be really quite hard-nosed about it, progressively more disciplined about it, and more determined to fulfil the goals that the partnership has set out. So that's my way of introduction. I hope helpful orientation. I'll now hand back to Robert, who will take us on to the next stage of our meeting. Thank you, Robert.
Yeah, thank you very much, Alan. And I'll ask you to stay there and also invite Jackie Benny, the Chief Officer of the Partnership Executive, to, as it were, join you on the virtual panel, I suppose. And this is an opportunity for everybody now to put questions to both Alan and Jackie, or make comments, but using that written chat box on probably on the right-hand side of your Zoom screen there. And then Alan and Jackie can respond to those, or conceivably bring other people in as well. So please do use that chat function. We've already had a couple of questions which I'll pick out. We have one from Rob Barnett. How can such a remote body tackle inequalities at ward level? We have one from David O'Hagan. How does this particular body manage the significantly diverse inequality gradients within places and across the whole? This is one of the undermining features of the RHA. Is the system prepared to move resources to support the most deprived? And then a rather, I don't know, ironic or despairing comment from Rob Barnett: health inequalities gap has actually widened, not decreased in my lifetime. So Alan and Jackie, I don't know if you want to pick up on any of those first 3 comments and questions, and then I can pick out others for you to take as well, and you can obviously yourselves see what's in the chat box on the right there.
Perhaps if I just take the first from Rob Barnett about how can such a remote body. One of the things I was trying to illustrate in the slide that showed the interrelationship between the public, places and organisations and the partnership is that the partnership recognises it is a relatively remote body from the people and doesn't want to replicate the relationship between organisations and places with the people they serve. What the partnership, that if you like, if the customers of those organisations and places are the people, the customers of the partnership are the organisations and places, and therefore that needs to be how the relationship works, so that the partnership doesn't doesn't try to be so locally sensitive that it's suppressing initiative in local places and so on. It needs to support that, I think. So the answer is, how can it? I think it doesn't intend to, is the answer.
Thank you.
Jackie would like to pick up one of the others.
I can't really add much more to that, to be honest. And that I see our role as supporting the places to address the issues that do need addressing around inequalities, and that's going to take quite a lot of fundamental changes and integration, both at a commissioning level and a provider level. But I'm sure we'll go into that in a bit more detail.
Thanks, Jackie. And then here's a question from Kate Abendstern, which is around measures of success. Has any work been done on the indicators that might be used? I'm especially interested in how we judge how strategic we're being. And Alan, that's one of the things you obviously focused on, that, you know, that we are talking about a strategic entity here, not an operational one. So either Jackie or Alan wanted to talk about those measures or indicators and how you can, I guess, behind the question, I don't know, Kate, is that risk, I suppose, you're alluding to there, of getting sucked into things at an operational level, particularly given the current context we find ourselves in.
It's been one of the challenges during the COVID period to make sure the partnership only contributes what's useful to the partners, rather than join in when it was the responsibility of other organisations. And Jackie and I have tried hard to only be operational when it's desired by partners and it's seen as helpful by partners. We are very keen that we don't replicate that. COVID has made the partnership more operational. We are very keen to move back away from operational as soon as it's reasonable to do so. But we do want to make the contribution. You know, we're in an all hands to the pump situation at the moment, and we don't want to just sit there and say, well, we're strategic, you know. So we are trying to help and be practical in these times, but very committed to returning to the fundamental role of the partnership, which is to be strategic. The question of measures, yes, we are starting to do work about looking at other partnerships that are further ahead than we are. I have to say it's pretty clear that there are better developed health and care partnerships, SDP, ICS is whatever language you want to use, than here, and we're looking to benefit from some of the work that's been going on elsewhere. It's really important that we are able to measure, and one of the traditions of particularly the public sector is impatience. And when you're talking strategic, one of the difficulties is measurement over time. You know, we tend to have monthly meetings, monthly cycle, and then we say, well, this strategy hasn't moved on much. Well, in a month, it tends not to. You know, we need to be prepared to look at strategic things over a longer period of time, but the minimum available. Can I just take the chance to pick up one of Tony Reeves' questions, which is to do with, no, and it might be, yeah, no, it is. Given the decision-making role of the board, are you satisfied that the makeup of the board has sufficient geographical coverage across Cheshire and Merseyside and reflect the relative populations of 9 places? No, is the answer. We need to do some work on that to make it much more so.
Thanks, Alan. And again, also bringing Jackie in if she'd like to respond to any of these along with you, Alan. I was drawn to the question just previous to that, Alan and Jackie, from David O'Hagan. How can the partnership interact rationally, or as opposed to irrationally, I suppose, with 9 local authorities, especially where the social determinants of health are more of their domain and their budgets are shrinking?
I think it's sort of that. I'm stumped a little bit because that's the point of the partnership, to do that, and I think we have and are developing mechanisms. But again, I'll return us to the point that this is about how does the partnership support place, and place is the setting in which that's generally more able to be tackled, and we want the partnerships to support that rather than try and run it. Yeah.
Okay. Now we've got more messages coming in, so I'm not going through them in a continuous scroll, but picking out certain ones. And Jackie and Alan, obviously you can pick out the ones that you'd like to respond to anyway. But One that strikes me is the one here from Abel Adegoke. I hope I pronounced your name correctly. Looking at the map of the places presented, there's obvious difference in their sizes. So how does the partnership ensure equal representation across them?
Well, as I said just a moment ago, I'm not satisfied that the partnership board has the right representation at the moment. I think it's got several imbalances. Size of a place is one thing, population is another, need is a third, makeup is a fourth, in that there may be multiple organisations in a place or very few, and we have to be able to be sensitive to those sorts of things. But in part, you know, we are at the meeting that's designed to do something about tackling about having widespread membership and inclusive membership as far as is possible, and to make sure that the partnership finds a way of taking those into account. Inevitably, to have a board that's effective, it needs to have relatively small numbers. You can have a board that sufficiently represents every particular situation and organisation, but then it could have 55 members on it and it wouldn't be a board at that point. And one of the problems routinely in the partnership, but particularly around the board, is gaining agreement and the sort of compromise that's needed to enable generally representative arrangements to be made. But the point of the board being held to account by the Assembly is we do get, via the Assembly, that wider engagement and scrutiny.
Thank you, Alan. And actually that partially answers, I guess, a question from Sue Musson there, which is, would you expand on the decision-making process, particularly in light of the Assembly's role to critique this? I think you've touched on that a bit there. There's another question a bit lower down, which is, I guess, to do with governance a little bit, but also organizational relationships, and particularly the relationship with the interface of NHSIE. How is that going to work? How do you see that working, Jackie and Alan?
Sorry, Joe Rafferty's question caught my eye, so I was distracted.
I'll go for that. Yeah.
From that. Jackie, do you want to talk about the relationship with NHSEI? And
yeah,
I'd like to answer Joe's in a minute.
Okay, so there's an ongoing dialogue with NHSEI in how we develop the partnership and how we're moving forward. They would see a future where more resources moved from the NHSI into the partnership to assist in the aims and ambitions of the partnership, really. So at a pure regulatory level, nothing changes at this moment in time, and indeed we have the NHS self structures because of the pandemic, but the partnership is working quite closely alongside the cells and supporting them wherever we can in terms of resources and coordinating functions. But when such a time comes, hopefully sooner rather than later, that we are able to step outside those arrangements, then there will be more arrangements in terms of oversight in the partnership, in the executive and board function, in terms of system working. So it's one of those things I think that's anticipated to change over the next 18 months to 2 years in terms of relationships, so that they discharge more. I don't want to use the word powers because I think it isn't quite a power thing, and there isn't, as many of you are aware, the partnership is not a statutory body, it's a partnership of organisations. But they do, NHSIE see the NHS functions at least being coordinated and assisted to be coordinated in a collaborative way across our system. Our job is to make that connection with the wider partners, so that there is some relationship, an important relationship with NHSIE, but we see ourselves as the conduit to the wider system because of the points that have been made numerous times in the chat about the links between the wider determinants of health. That is what we're trying to achieve in terms of collaboration, because we know that the health approach is much more reactive than the health and well-being approach that we need to be taking to reduce those inequalities.
Very good, thank you, Jackie. And I think, Alan, you wanted to come back to Joe Rafferty's question.
Yeah, the board's composition needs attention, but when? I think that's a helpful comment, and we have some decisions to make, and particularly with the NHS nationally behaving in a way where it's providing funding to systems rather than organisations increasingly, or funding on that basis. What I would say, sort of in process terms, and it's another bit about the usefulness of the assembly. At the end of this meeting, you're going to be asked, well, what needs to happen to enable places to be more effective? And one of those answers could be the partnership board needs to be sorted out. And that would give power to our elbow in the negotiations we've had in certain places where there's been resistance to some of that change. So please do make those sorts of comments if you feel the need. Can I pick up Mike Harden's question about, is Cheshire and Merseyside too big? I think that there is an argument that it's very large. In the time outside this job that I'm made available to me, I do some management consultancy. I'm working with one area in the southwest of England at the moment, and they've got a relatively small geography and a low number of organisations. And what happens there is the partnership and the places are getting in each other's way because it's not clear the gap between the two. And though, whilst I think Cheshire and Merseyside is quite large, it also distinguishes much more clearly what the role of place is and what the role of the partnership is. And I think it's that relationship is determined by good behaviour and the partnership sticking to its job and supporting and enabling places to do their job. I think in particularly in Cheshire and Merseyside, there is, well, first of all, there was a decision made, and certainly the NHS nationally regards it as Cheshire and Merseyside is it. But it is a natural community in that those places that border both the city region and Cheshire quite often belong to both. And Mike's own organisation has been placed in a situation where should it turn left or should it turn right? Well, could it not belong to the whole thing instead? So I think whilst there is a question to be answered and we need to manage it well, there is some naturalness about Cheshire and Merseyside as well, as long as there's an emphasis on place and places are able to be locally sensitive.
Very good, thank you, Alan. I think we'll bring the session to a close in a minute. I think I'd just like to pick out one last question, and it's Paula Cowan's question. I understand the necessary queries regarding the composition of the board and assembly, but no one has mentioned our population, residents, patients, those for whom we are here to serve. How will these structures ensure the needs of our populations and voices are heard, that we address the wider determinants of health, and that we approach with a what matters to you rather than a what's the matter with you approach? Perhaps we can just touch on that before we move on to the next part of our session.
Well, I'd provide a little bit of a defence, Paul. I did in my talk about the population, about population health, and if you'll remember slide 4, it started with the population and their needs, because I think that's where it starts. Largely, our view of the partnership is that relationship between the public is with the organisations and places, and not with the partnership. As I said, the partnership is here to serve the organisations and places. The organisations and places are there to serve the population. So what Paula says, and particularly from a place point of view, is very welcome, and I'm absolutely in support of what she's describing there.
Fantastic, thank you. Thank you both to Alan and Jackie, and thank you those of you who put questions and comments in the chat. This session is being recorded, and so there'll be opportunities later to come back and review some of those questions, and I'm sure Alan and Jackie will be able to come back to some of the unanswered questions here and now. We're going to move on to the next part of our session, and we've billed this as stories from the places, and what we're actually going to see is a kind of a suite, a montage of videos giving us a flavor really of what it's like. If the partnership is about places, let's find out what's happening at that level, and hear some of those stories. So you can, as it were, sit back and relax for this section. We've got about 20 minutes of video. So there's 9 different videos, roughly 2 minutes or so each, just to try and bring alive what's going on out there. So yeah, sit back and enjoy. You're welcome, of course, to make comments in the chat box. And then when we come back, we'll give a bit more flavour of what's coming out of Places too, and some of the pre-work we did, talking to place leads and others. So if we could run the videos now, that would be fantastic. Thank you. And I'm just going to come in for a second and ask the videos to go back to the
But there are existing.
Losing the sound. If we could maybe just return to the start. Thank you.
A lot has changed since the NHS was established in 1948. In response to this, the NHS has published its plan for the next 10 years. This includes increased funding, more use of digital technology, and closer work between health and social care to help people stay healthy and deliver better care to people. So, what does this mean for Wirral? Wirral will receive extra funding, but there are existing challenges. These challenges include increasing demand on our health and care services, an ageing population, and variations in the health outcomes across communities, including a 10-year life expectancy gap. Change is needed if we're to maintain the quality of care and a positive patient experience. NHS organisations, GP practices and Wirral Council have come together to form the Healthy Wirral Partnership. This partnership is committed to act as one to transform our local health and care system. This means transforming clinical services to provide effective, high-quality care which is flexible and able to adapt to the changing future needs of our population. Making our services more joined up to avoid delays which put pressure on local services. Helping people lead healthier lives and recognising that illness is not the only cause for people becoming unwell. For example, poor housing and those living in isolation. This will result in a financially sustainable health and care system that provides more effective, high-quality services, ensuring that everyone in Wirral has the chance to live a healthier life. How will we do this? We are introducing place-based care. Place-based care is a new way to plan and deliver services. Some services will continue to be delivered in the same way, whilst others will be tailored around the needs of different communities and local neighbourhoods. Neighbourhoods are a key part of place-based care. 9 neighbourhoods have been established across Wirral, each serving a population of between 30 to 50,000 people. Each neighbourhood will have a local team made up of GP practices, mental health, social care, community and voluntary services. The teams will share responsibility for people in their neighbourhood, identifying those at the highest risk of becoming unwell, working with the person rather than just the medical needs, helping people stay independent and maintaining a good quality of life. Neighbourhoods present a unique opportunity for us to work together and put in place the services and support that people need to live longer and healthier lives.
The first thing children at Halton Lodge Primary School do is get moving. Each school day starts with a wake up and shake up session. Lots of fun with some serious health benefits. Halton's leading the way in health and well-being for schools. It's one of the few places in the country where everyone is signed up to its Healthy Schools programme, delivered by its integrated wellness service, supported by Health Lead Counsellor Marie Wright and tailored to each school's needs.
We've got every single school included and they're all very supportive of it. They all make time for the children to join in, and if we can work with children and help them to improve their health and well-being and to feel good about themselves and to feel active and to eat healthily, that then transmits to the home and the parents get interested and eventually it filters out into the community, and so we have a ripple effect and then everybody feels better.
So what does having a lot of sugar do for our bodies?
This school wanted their children to move more and eat more healthily. Today, there's a lesson on making the right drink choices.
Spot on, that's a really great answer, yes.
Taking part, children from the school sports council. It was set up to get children involved in making decisions on how to be active. One of those brought in an innovative approach to playtime, known as the Scrap Store Play Pod. It's an inclusive way to get everyone moving.
I like in it that there's this barrel that you can go in and you can go around in it, and you have to move yourself to move that, and it's really fun. And now with the play pod you get to play with stuff and it just makes it more fun.
While fun is fundamental, health and well-being is the real target. Through its 5 Ways to Wellbeing, Halton Borough Council helps its schools to work not just on the body but the mind as well.
You feel the strength in your thigh.
This school's especially focused on the emotional health and well-being of the children here. They take part in yoga, mindfulness sessions, meditation and massage, all integrated into the school day.
We give the children strategies to cope with learning new spellings and times tables, and we just felt they need strategies to manage their mental health and their emotional well-being. And we just saw all the benefits of it and decided to, as much as possible, get it into the timetable.
Once we've done it, the classroom becomes quieter, which makes it easier to concentrate. I feel free, so if I have any worries on my mind, they go away in a way.
And the evidence backs up its success.
We've seen an improvement in self-harm rates. We've seen more children getting active, and we've also got more parents getting active. We're seeing improvement in school, and we're also seeing improvement at home.
My name's Karen Nolan and I coordinate Living Well Sefton, and I work for Sefton CVS. Okay, Sefton CVS have been coordinating the Living Well Sefton partnership for the last 2.5 years. In that time we've been very successful in developing our brand. So our new Living Well Sefton model that we're proposing is going to mirror the council's new locality model and also mirror the new structure within Sefton CVS. And we're going to have lead partners in the North, Central and South localities, those being Bright Living Partnerships, Feel Good Factory and May Logan Centre. These partners have been part of Living Well Sefton since it started in July 2016. So within each of the localities we're going to have a universal offer which will include GP-based support, universal consultations, social prescribing support, behaviour change and goal setting, and also community NHS health checks. The benefit of having these partners lead in those localities is that they've been working there for a number of years. They know the communities that they're there to support. They are recognised brands. The communities trust those organisations. So that universal offer is really going to be the backbone of the whole service. Sitting underneath the universal offer is the thematic support. So over the last 2.5 years, we've identified where the gaps are in the existing support and where perhaps more input is required to build on the offer that's already available. Now, social isolation remains a real issue across the borough, so we're delighted that Community Connectors are going to be part of Living Well Sefton, really helping us enhance the offer and reduce the impact of social isolation and loneliness across all age groups, not just older people.
My name is Brian Dorr. I'm the CEO of Safer Generation, and we're happy to be a partner of the Living Well Sefton programme.
Hello, we are Woodvale and Ainsdale Community Association, and we are happy to be a partner of Living Well Sefton.
Hello, my name's Colin Avery. I'm the administrator of Southport Food Bank, and we're glad to be a partner of the Living Well Sefton.
Hi, I'm Helen and I work in the Knowsley Integrated Community Frailty Team. The service involves health and social care partners across Knowsley working together to better meet the needs of people aged 65 and over and help prevent unnecessary hospital admissions. The Integrated Community Frailty Team is a partnership between North West Boroughs Healthcare NHS Foundation Trust, Knowsley Council, Knowsley Clinical Commissioning Group, North West Ambulance Service, St Helens and Knowsley Teaching Hospitals NHS Foundation Trust and Aintree University Hospital NHS Foundation Trust. Together, we have redesigned our services so we can offer a rapid 2-hour response when older people are at risk of hospital admission. The team is led by community matrons who have specialist skills in supporting adults with frailty and is supported by doctors, nurses, therapists, social care, pharmacists and specialist falls assessors. By having different health and social care professionals working together, it means we can ensure a care package is put in place which meets all of the patient's needs. By bringing care closer to home, we are also relieving pressure on the whole of the local healthcare system.
My name is Neville Treppers. I'm 81 years old. I feel that if I'd have had more home care, I wouldn't have gone into hospital on several occasions. Last year I spent 3 months in Warrington Hospital and then 5 weeks in Padgett House, and I had to be taught to walk again because I'd spent 3 months in bed. And I still have problems with mobility, and I feel that if I'd have had more earlier care, I probably would not have spent so much time in hospital. As I have cellulitis, on 2 occasions I have had the IV community system, and that's, I feel, stopped me from going in hospital on those occasions. And I feel if that was more readily available, I wouldn't be using your bed up in hospital. Well, the most obvious one is kept me out of hospital more so than, as I say, I've been in 5 times, and if the community system had been more involved, I wouldn't have been in at all that time. So, you know, I do feel, I feel that I'm happier at home, and
Hello and welcome to Cheshire East Place. I'm Mark Palethorpe. I'm the Executive Director of People at Cheshire East Council, and I'm also really proud to be the place lead for our system. Now, it's obvious, as I'm a local government person, to you all to see that having local government at the heart of everything that we do is really, really important, because we recognise as a system, and if you look at our plan on page 9, it talks about those health outcomes and how they're achieved, and the issues around inequalities are sitting outside of those kind of clinical inputs. So the clinical element of this is really, really important to get that offer right and to have it focused on what is going to help our population, but those wider determinants around lifestyle, around environment, around education, around housing, how much you earn, what sort of job you have. Those sort of things are going to influence those health outcomes. So it's really important that we work together as local government and our NHS partners to deliver on those things. So our place is really focused on, okay, we've got the bringing together of the infrastructure, whether it's ICPs or ICSs, but delivering on what we said we would do and making it a sustainable system for the future. And when I say system, this is about strong partnership. This is about integration, parity of integration, and also making sure that we take the benefits of all of that together, and that one part of the system doesn't benefit against another part of the system. So that's really important. We have some real sort of challenging conversations in Cheshire East, but that's the right thing to do, because it's about how do we get the best for our population. So
over recent months here in Liverpool, all of the public sector partners have been working together to develop a new plan for the city, a new city plan. And a key part of that is the One Liverpool plan for improving health and care outcomes across the whole of Liverpool and tackling health inequality at the same time. This is very much about a transformation of the whole system and a shift to a whole population health model, which a lot of you will be familiar with. But this is really important as a key component of the whole city plan, not just in delivering significantly improved health outcomes, but also boosting productivity in our economy, helping to tackle deprivation and underlying issues that are holding back our communities and our families from achieving their full potential and living long and healthy and happy lives. So the health work that we do is really important just from a health perspective, but it makes a massive difference in terms of those wider issues that really determine the quality of life for people in Liverpool.
Hello and welcome to Cheshire West, Our Place. Our Place has its people at the centre. Wrapped around them are our local services such as GP practices and care homes, the local authority and other NHS organisations. In Cheshire West, we focus on our 9 care communities that are made up of everything that help people be the best they can be. I'm now going to hand over to one of our clinical directors, Rebecca Banks, who, pre-COVID, recorded this piece about one of the projects we now have in Our Place.
Hello, my name's Rebecca. I'm a GP in Chester, and I would like to tell you about some work being done by the Cheshire West Integrated Care Partnership. This is a collaboration of health and care providers who are working together to provide joined-up care for the people of Cheshire West. One of the projects we're focusing on at the moment is to look at the top 50 most frequent attenders at A&E and general practice, and these patients have been identified using a system called ClickView. We have a project manager starting in April who is going to work directly with these patients and also with the agencies who are involved in their lives currently. We hope that by really addressing their issues, we will see a reduction in their use of GP appointments and A&E attendances. The first meeting brought together a wide range of people who would not otherwise have crossed paths normally. For example, we learnt that the police have dedicated mental health officers who in turn have access to a wide range of community support that would really be of benefit with this work. We're going to use all the information that we shared to support the project manager going forward. By providing the vehicle to bring all the key stakeholders together in one room, we've really been able to see the benefits that the ICP can make to our patients.
Thank you for listening. I hope you enjoyed that small insight into Cheshire West, Our Place.
The local authority commissioned a piece of work as to how the public sector organisations, with the lead social landlord and together with the third and voluntary sector, could come together and work in genuine collaboration to maximise what resources we did have. We recognised by carrying on as we were, each individual organisation was facing an increasing deficit. We also recognised that if any one organisation fell over, it would impact on all the others in St Helens, so if we didn't pull together, we would all be severely affected. It concentrated minds. But there was a real energy and will to make it happen, and thus the People's Board began its journey.
I first lost my dad in June 2016, and then I lost my mum in April 2017. A lot of the meaning in my life was gone because I was caring for my mum at the time. I felt like I had no use or no meaning. I was basically not wanting to be here or be awake a lot of the time. I was diagnosed with nerve damage caused by malnutrition. I wasn't eating, I was just living basically upstairs, so that the bills on the house were just getting up and up and up, and then when I was in hospital they went round and just emptied the house. My case shows that when people are working independently and don't liaise with other people, people can slip through the nets. So it definitely helps when you've got the bed coordinator speaking to your physiotherapist speaking to your psychiatric nurse, and everyone being in sync and working together. They basically said to me, we'll do all the worrying for you, you just concentrate on getting better. So I just want to say thank you, I really mean it.
Well, thank you very much indeed for all the people who worked so hard to put those videos together. I mean, I don't know about you, but I found some of those really quite moving, particularly the last one, but others as well. And I've seen some very nice comments in the chat box as well. And I think it just reminds us, doesn't it, of the reality of the work that so many of you and your colleagues are doing. So thank you again. I'm going to, and I should say again, actually, this session is being recorded. So if you'd like to rewatch that montage, you can do that or share it with your colleagues. But I'm going to, conscious of time, so I'm going to move us on. And this next section is about getting some of the feedback from those 9 places. So through the place leads, we asked a series of questions, had a series of comments back. I just want to give you a flavor over the next, I guess, 15 minutes perhaps of what came out. And to do this, as well as having Alan and Jackie back on the panel, as it were, I'm going to invite the place leads themselves to unmute themselves and switch their videos on as well, so that they can contribute and where necessary, explain comments or add further or refine certain points and indeed ask further questions. So this is going to be a little bit of I guess, a kind of live sort of group panel discussion or whatever, based around 3 or 4 questions that we sent out in advance of this meeting. So if I can have the next slide, please. This is the first question we asked, and what I picked out here are really just a few of the key comments. We had quite a lot of discussion and comment that came back. I'll run through them, but very much expecting Alan, Jackie, the place leads to comment as we go through as well, and I invite all of them to pick out any of these. So this is the first question. So how should the partnership be interacting with place or places? We have this point about recognizing the unique identity of each place, and obviously that's a balance, isn't it, between what's unique and what's general, what can be shared, what can't be shared. There's this key point again about harnessing information, gathering inspiration and sharing. The word share, as you can imagine, came out quite a lot. There's this notion of inclusion. I noticed in the group chat as well, lots of comments about inclusion in every sense of the word, actually, but including our other public sector and voluntary organizations. Wanting to have no visible lines between partnership and place. Kind of quite a striking phrase that, but be interested to know how the place leads themselves or Alan and Jackie might interpret that. As you might expect, there needs to be early communication and engagement, a kind of no surprises theme perhaps there. This point about crystal clear governance and accountability, and Alan's touched on that a bit in terms of the architecture of the partnership and decision making. Showing how programs support places, so what's the link there? Connecting place to the HCP plans so that you don't have this this kind of dispersion of plans in all sorts of different formats, I guess, with all sorts of different objectives. And maybe a more technical question on how to represent place on the partnership board. So that there were many other comments. I've just picked out some of the more prominent ones, perhaps. But let me invite Jackie, Alan, and the place leads to pick out any one of those, perhaps, and comment. And again, you in the in the written chat, please comment too.
So perhaps I could start with a couple of those points there, and to make people aware of some of the things that we're planning to do, or in the throes of planning to do, to really enhance that engagement between partnership and place, and build on what we've just been seeing, some fantastic work in each places, and how we can cross-fertilise a lot of that work. So we're about to launch an integrated care partnership network, which is for the benefit of all the places. It's an informal network to share good practice and to share how we're evolving our governance in place around provision initially, but also making that link to integrated commissioning. And you can see even from the videos that you've got different people doing different things. They're all unique, as has been said, but there's a lot to learn from each other, and there's a lot we can do as a partnership to support that development and bring some resources into the partnership to support that development. So I hope that that will go a long way to getting the work of partnership in place. The second thing that we're currently doing, not yet work complete, is reviewing all the programmes. Because the programmes, as you've said in some of these commentaries, need to be achieving the aims and ambitions of the partnership and in place. And they also need to support the places, but also not duplicate or replace what can be done effectively at place. So some of the content of programmes now could be done effectively in place and don't necessarily need to be a partnership. We need to determine that.
Thank you, Jackie. I think we lost a little bit of your audio as we were going through that, but I think we got the
feedback. Sorry.
You're getting some feedback, were you? Yeah. Okay. So just a reminder to people to just to remain on mute unless they are directly speaking at that moment, because that just helps with those feedback issues and background noises. Thank you, Jackie. So let me hear maybe one or two of the place leads might like to comment on this first question or any of the points made in it.
Hi, Robert. I'm happy to contribute. Thanks, if that's okay.
Yeah.
Sandy, hello everybody, and just a quick thank you to everybody for getting things ready. I know I've been pestering people over the past few weeks at a busy time, so much appreciated. I think this was a really important question, and we've had good conversations about what each place needs to do and what we can benefit from as being part of a partnership. And that's why the question was about what can make the partnership work for you. And both Jackie and Alan have been really honest about they want to see a good thriving partnership based on what's important to place, and do at the scale, as Alan says, that are important things, those things that we can't deliver in our places alone. So and I think that came through in some of the feedback that I've seen in response to that question, and the bullet points to capture it all, but it was one of the most important questions of things to get right so that we can start right in this venture together. Thank you, Robert.
Is it okay if I come in as well? I think for me, these are the same questions that we're asking in our places as well, within the structures and systems and processes we're trying to put in place. And I suppose we talk about organisations, but fundamentally those are people, and many of those people in our place live in that place as well. So this is very much about how do we get people engaged with this delivery, because every one of us on this call has a stake in it, either because we work or because we live in these places.
Very good, thank you. Who else would like to come in on this?
Hi, it's Fiona Taylor here from Sefton, the AO, the CCGs, but also the place-based lead, or the borough lead as we would call it in Sefton, just to be different. I think some of the comments that have been put in the chat box, in part of what we're trying to do today, I guess, is put place in that centre of what we're doing in the partnership. And I think the video, the vignettes have shown, you know, the diversity. And I think one of the things that's really important, and Alison Lee made the comment on the chat, is how we connect the place up to the partnership and the the core of the partnership, and I think that's been reiterated by Jackie and Alan. And I think to avoid duplication and really think about how health and wellbeing boards and some of the democratic legitimacy is placed into the partnership, but from the place upwards.
Very good. Thank you very much, Fiona. And I think, Mark, you wanted to come in as well.
Yeah, thanks, Robert. I think it kind of builds on what Fiona's just said around the sort of power of health and wellbeing boards. So that third bullet point there around including public sector and other voluntary organisations. So we're really clear that this isn't about a health and care solution to the system. This is very much around all those wider determinants, tackling that issue of inequalities that people have talked about on the chat. And that won't happen unless you engage and harness the power of what we have in local government and also the partnerships that we have and the ability to influence some of that. But that is in the backdrop of some very challenging financial situations that we're facing at the moment, and you can't underestimate that. But I do think including the wider place environment, looking at the built environment as well as the way in which we utilise the way that public sector organisations and working with private sector organisations can influence those wider determinants in terms of income, job, skills, which we know are going to be a challenge with people coming off furlough. And so our most complex individuals, our most vulnerable individuals, children and adults, are going to be really exposed to some of these inequalities. So it's probably more important now than ever.
That's great, Mark. Thank you. And just another quick reminder to mute yourself if you're not actually speaking. I'm still getting a little bit of background noise there. Any other thoughts and comments on this first question from Alan, Jackie, or any of the place leads, please?
It's Sarah O'Brien, St Helens. Just one, I agree with everything everybody said. And actually, for me, a really successful partnership place is the partnership, isn't it? You know, that question normally puts it like it's two separate entities. The partnership's an entity and the place is an entity, but actually the partnership is the system. So all 9 places make up the system, they make up the partnership. And if they develop to become strong places with every key partner in place, including those who represent third and voluntary sector, but also have a role in socio-economic factors and economic recovery, are all interacting at place to address inequalities at place, that collectively makes up the partnership. So I'd like to see, as we mature, that we almost move away from some of these discussions, because we do need to get the governance right, and some of that's come through, but each place is bottom up, each place makes up the partnership, would be my reflection.
Very good. Thank you, Sarah. That's really helpful. Yes, Izzy, I see you're moving the slides around. Could we have the next one, actually? Okay, so this question, what say should place have in the partnerships planning processes? I mean, we had a little bit of this before. Alan, you touched on this, and we had some comments in the chat too. I'll just pick out the points quickly, and then again invite place leads and Alan and Jackie to comment. So maybe the partnership should prioritize some plans. Places should engage with the partnership on population requirements at scale to reduce inequalities. And we've got that point there again about using the benefit of the partnerships and breadth, if you like. Maybe places can support action planning. Places to be consulted on HCP on developments in the partnership. Here's an interesting one. Place has primacy, so it has to be central to the partnership's planning process, including influencing funding allocations to programs. And I've noticed in the chat as well a few questions there about kind of specific questions about resource allocation from the partnership. And here's almost the reverse thing, place to seed some things to the bigger footprint. Be interesting to explore what that would be, how it would work. Partnership needs to be accountable to its constituents. We've talked a bit about that. I think that maybe watching some of those videos gave us a sense of that, or a very, an emotional sense of that too. Need to refocus on the wider system and things that sometimes get excluded, social care perhaps, being brought into that purview. And including the voice of local people in the planning process itself. And again, we've heard quite a bit on the chat too about trying to bring that local voice, that grassroots voice into the mix as well. So there are a few points for the place leads now to perhaps expand on or unearth a little bit further. And Alan and Jackie too, you're welcome to comment as well. Thank you.
Robert, it's Alan. Can I just make a general point, and that is something I didn't say as clearly as I might have done in the introduction to the partnership. I think there's an underlying principle that's sometimes called subsidiarity, and I struggle with the word subsidiarity because it includes subsidiary in it, and it suggests there's a hierarchy, and that hierarchical thinking is sometimes unhelpful. I think it's important that the burden of proof lies with those who want to aggregate things further and further away from the people. And therefore things should be done at a neighbourhood basis, if at all possible. And if they can't be done at that level, and there's a clear benefit from aggregating to a greater level at place level, for example, then you do that. Therefore, the only reason you would do things at a partnership level is that there is benefit, there is added value from doing so. And I think that needs to be an underlying principle to our approach to the relationship between place and partnership around planning processes as well as around other things.
Thank you, Alan. That's very helpful. We have a throat clearing. Clearing of the throat. Who's clearing their throat and ready to come in?
I was just going to make a comment. I wasn't clearing my throat, but I'd like to make a comment if you can hear me. Diane Johnson from Knowsley. And I think it's just to build on the comment there that it does inevitably, because I suppose the way the questions are framed about what can the partnership do, it does have a feel of hierarchy as Alan's explaining there. But I do feel very strongly that places are very focused on population health and the inequalities, and so should be influencing the priorities of the partnership as well. So some places will have different priorities depending on their population needs. And I suppose to be really successful and for places to be everything everybody would like them to be in this venture, we have to embrace that potential differences in priorities, and really it is the view that the partnership really ought to seek direction as well from the places in terms of priorities and programs of work. I think that would make it more successful and feel less hierarchical, which I think you've just sort of explained is not where you wish to go, Alan, anyway, in terms of hierarchy. We should be a partnership and we should influence. So I think it is important that place plays a big part in setting priorities.
Thank you, Diane. I'm going to move us on very shortly, but I've noticed in the chat a couple of people just saying, just asking to know, who the place leads are. I wonder, Andy, could you just very quickly sort of say who we won't do a sort of full round of introductions, but just say a little bit about who the place leads are and kind of where they've come from.
I can do. So obviously each place we've had our programs running for quite a while. So in Warrington, it's Warrington Together, and I'm the place lead there. My name's Andy Davis. I'm a GP by background, and we've been running the program there for a year or so. And I'm also the chief officer for Warrington CCG and Halton CCG. And I've got colleagues who are place leads. So we've got Simon Banks, who is place lead for Wirral, and he's the chief officer for the CCG there. We've got Diane Johnson, who was just speaking, who's the chief officer in Knowsley. And we've got Fiona Taylor, who I think you heard before, who's a chief officer in Sefton, and is also a nurse by background as well. We've got on the call Delith as well, Delith Curtis, who I believe is ADAS from Cheshire East, and I hope I got that right, Delith, and you're place lead for Cheshire East, and Mike Palethorpe, similarly, a local authority colleague and place lead for Cheshire West, and then Jan Ledwood, who's chief officer in Liverpool, and my close neighbour Sarah O'Brien from St Helens, again nurse by background and chief officer there, and David Parr, who's unfortunately had to duck off the call for other business, who's the chief executive in Halton and leads the One Halton programme. So there's a good mix across health, local authority colleagues, and we're all basically here, I think, as coordination points for our places, and we perhaps have different approaches in each place around programme structures to deliver the work, but it's very similar focus on that inequalities gradient, and how do we activate communities and work with our local politicians and people to make sure that we're aligning the efforts that we've got across commissioning and provision to get the best we can with the resources we've got.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Andy, and impressive memory skills there. Izzy, could we have the next slide, please? And again, I'm a little conscious of time. After this section, we're going to go into our breakout rooms. But just a couple more things to touch on first. Which areas of responsibility are your place purview, and should they be autonomous of the partnership? So this is a question not so much about the interrelation between place and partnership, but where the kind of boundaries are, where the autonomy lies. A few comments here about being cautious about narrower place-based autonomy because we want to maximize the partnership role. That maybe the partnerships should be more strategic, allowing the place to implement autonomously. So a difference between, I guess, strategy and delivery. We have a point about what's statutory for councils and CCGs, which should remain autonomous. Clearly, place may benefit from whole system working. Health and social care can be delivered effectively in community. That in-community delivery might be autonomous. Service delivery to be based on local intelligence and need, not necessarily autonomous, I guess, but recognizing the need for local intel. And so, in fact, some decision-making should be related between the two entities or classes of entity. So again, let me ask any of the place leads, Alan and Jackie, if they'd like to pick out any of those points and enlarge on them.
Hi, it's Fiona Taylor here from Sefton. I guess some of those comments are at the crux of the anxiety and the angst in terms of legitimacy of the partnership. And I think, you know, it's trying to install that democratic golden thread back into what works in a place, as opposed to the partnership finding that legitimacy. I think the two things need to obviously work together, but working on and building up the place. I see somebody in the chat box talks about us knowing each other. There have been some, just prior to COVID, some changes in place-based leads, so we've not had the opportunities necessarily to get together, but I think most of us do know each other. And I think the sharing and learning is really important here, and informing the partnership. I think there's already been comments already around tightening up some of the representation and governance, but my role is to make sure down in Sefton in the place we're getting all the partners and the public voice into that change, as we've been doing for the last few years in our transformation programme. I'm really making sure that that's brought to life up in the partnership and supporting the big strategic ask that the partnerships have got.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Fiona. And Diane, am I right in thinking you wanted to come in?
Yeah, I do believe my hand's up from before, but all the same, I was going to come in. And
okay.
And again, just thank you, Rob. So Diane from Knowsley. I just want to build on the theme that when we talk about place and primacy of place, I think there's obviously a need for places to deliver improvements and reduce health inequalities. Well, then I think there ought to be a principle within what we're trying to achieve as a partnership, whereby, you know, say improvements can be agreed or set, and then the place can be left to get on and deliver it. Now, obviously, if they're delivering that, that's great. But actually, the way everybody does it comes back to my earlier comment of places working together, like we have Knowsley better together. We collectively will know more about how to achieve that locally. So it's a little bit around that, understanding the linkages, but then being enabled to get on with it. And I think that's part of that autonomy that's mentioned in some way. So if we agree what we need to achieve, then how we go about that within the resources we've got and with our population working together, housing, you know, education, employment, everything, and be allowed as a place, you know, enabled to achieve that. So that, I think, is certainly underpinning the Knowsley comments, which I see reflected in that feedback.
Very good. Thank you very much, Diane. And if we can just have the last slide from this section, Izzy, that would be great. And a few more comments. And this is the kind of converse question: what do you expect the partnership to own? A kind of rhetorical question there at the beginning: do we not need the partnership to have overarching ownership and accountability? And there's some questions in the chat I notice about the kind of status of that accountability. I think David O'Hagan, what's the partnership statutory basis you're asking there? We want the partnership to own strategic planning at scale, so that word comes up again, strategic commissioning at scale, reviewing population needs, and we've heard that kind of population-wide, that wide-angle view of the population, I guess. Tackling whole system inequalities, picking up again on the equalities discussion in the chat we've got going there. Critical point here about gathering and sharing system learning, best practice and horizon scanning. This coordinating facilitative role, and obviously areas where there's benefit from an at-scale approach. I don't think there's much that's particularly contentious in any of that, but again, just finally on this slide before we go to our breakouts, if there are comments or embellishments that any of the place leads or Jackie and Alan would like to add, please do.
Can I, Robert, it's Alan Yates again, just connect those thoughts with David O'Hagan's question about partnership statutory basis. First of all, I think those questions of the partnership fall very much into the sort of things that the partnership can contribute and can contribute with added value, about those connections, about identifying issues, about enabling initiatives, supporting initiatives, having some seed money to get something to start to happen, to enable peer accountability to go on. But David's question is about a statutory basis for that, and there isn't one. And the expectation of legislation is it will be at least 2 years before there is one. And what that will be is a matter of speculation. And therefore, what's the position we're in at the moment? And I have to say, my thoughts turn to CHAMPS, the public health organisation. Except it's not really an organisation, it's a partnership. It's a partnership of the local authority public health directors. And I think it's a really good example of a collection of people starting with their places and determining that there's value in working in partnership in certain respects. They still very much work inside their place, but they work across the whole geography of Cheshire and Merseyside as well. And I think as a fairly simplistic proxy for the nature of the developing partnership, it's a helpful one. And if people are familiar or not familiar, perhaps they could make themselves familiar with the CHAMPS model, because I think it's quite close to the developing sense of direction of the health and care partnership.
Thank you very much indeed, Alan. And I'm conscious there are all sorts of things going on in the chat. It's pretty lively on the chat. And I'm sure there are people who wish to comment further on this, but I am also conscious of time and want to give you the opportunity of diving into a bit more detail and being able to actually kind of speak and converse. So I'm going to move us towards our breakout groups. Izzy, perhaps you could bring up the next slide for me, please. We're going to go into these breakouts. There are 9 altogether, 9 breakout rooms, virtual rooms. The question that all of you are going to be tackling is this one: what has to happen now to make places work at their best? So it's just one question: what has to happen now to make places work at their best? And just a little bit of protocol on this on the next slide to explain what's going to go on in this. So we've randomly assigned groups because we wanted to get a good mix, but each group will be led by a place lead, many of whom you will have now seen on screen. As this is happening, there's a kind of slightly sort of nervous moment where you're kind of waiting to be allocated into your room, and the screen might kind of go blank, or you might see a little square. Don't panic. you are going to be sort of taken into that room, and just trust that process. Once in your group, please, when you're ready to speak, unmute and chat normally with your group. So it's obviously a smaller group than we've got 167 participants at the moment. It'll be smaller than that, and you should be able to have a kind of live conversation with your place lead as your facilitator. The session's going to last about 30 minutes, and when it ends, you'll automatically be returned into the main meeting room. This is a facilitator's dream. Normally in a live session, you ask people to come back and everybody goes off and gets a coffee or makes a phone call. This just happens automatically. So that's how this process is going to work. While that's going on, the facilitators of your group are going to be messaging me. We have a separate WhatsApp group going on, giving me live feedback or feeding back to the key points from your groups, which I will then play back into the main room once we return. So that is the process. Fingers crossed. See you back in this main room in about 30 minutes. Thank you, Izzy. Okay, very good. I'm assuming we're all kind of back now. Well, judging from the amount of activity in the WhatsApp group with all the facilitators, those sounded like some extremely lively sessions. Very, very rich by the sound of it, and very, very engaged process too. So I've been in that WhatsApp chat, listening to some of that feedback as it's come out in all its abundance, and trying in real time to put a little bit of shape on it, which obviously won't be perfect because this is done sort of live. But I would say the kind of feedback we have falls into 4 main categories, and I'm going to go through it briefly and then invite Alan and Jackie to comment on it, and also if the place leads wish to comment too. And Alan and Jackie, please also draw others in from the wider group to explore some of these themes. And we're already coming up to 10 past the hour, and we're going to finish by 12:30. So I recognize there's quite a lot to get through in a short amount of time. But I would say there are 4 categories here, all happily beginning with D. Let's call them democracy. That's about inclusion, role of elected members, localism, reaching out, and so on. That's one category. I'll say a little bit more about each of these. Probably the most active category was around design. In other words, what is the design of this structure? What's the mandate of this partnership? How does it interface with all the other bodies? Lots of talk about HWBB, the interface with local authorities, whether or not this is just a renamed STP, whether it's a renamed Strategic Health Authority, comments about, are we going back to the future? So that's the second D, first democracy, then design. Third one, direction, I suppose, which is, what is the focus of this partnership? What are its priorities? How do we align those with local priorities? Will resources be directed in a certain way? How will commissioning work? And how do we avoid duplication? And then the final D, which is interesting, and particularly as it came up so much earlier in the group chat, is around the digital, actually. Lots of comment on the group chat earlier about digital exclusion, and it's come up quite a few times here in the breakout groups. How do we include people digitally? How do we enhance our services from that point of view? So those are the categories: democracy, the digital, design, and direction. So I'll bring in Alan and Jackie on this. Firstly, on the democracy point, I'm hearing a lot in the feedback about how really to engage with local people. And I suppose if I were to put a slightly glass half empty spin on this, I'll do glass half full in a moment. The glass half empty version of this is, there's an awful lot of infrastructure here, awful lot of bodies orbiting around one another. Does that get in the way of accessing local people, residents and people who live in the 9 places, but also the interface with elected members, so the representatives, I guess, of the people in the places, and how that political, with a small p, process or representative process can get folded in effectively into this partnership. So let me put that topic in, or first topic, into Alan and Jackie, on the understanding you may wish to bring others in as well on that theme.
So you missed the best bit before I unmuted.
Oh, sorry. Sorry.
Apologies for that. I think first of all, I'll go back to some of the points I've made about the primacy of place, and I think a huge amount of what we are describing needs to continue to happen at place. It's really important. That is where there is a democratic mandate. It's where things are real. It's where they respond to a population's specific needs rather than a general view. And therefore, there seems to me a recurring concern. Yeah, but this hierarchical body is going to countermand and overwhelm all of that. And I'll repeat, it is not Jackie's and my intention that it does that. It is Jackie's and my intention that it supports and enables places to work effectively, and that's where the interface is. Having said that, I did say in response to an earlier question, the membership of the partnership board needs reforming, in my view. It needs reforming in at least two respects. One is that it's more representative of places than organisations, and the second, it needs greater democratic membership. It needs democratically elected people on that as well, and I'd be looking for council leaders, portfolio heads, people like that being part of the board as well, and that's how you start to overcome some of those things. But an important thing is that the partnership isn't first and foremost the public-facing part of this. The places are the public-facing part, and the partnership supports the places in that.
Thank you, Alan. Would any Jackie or any of the place leads like to come in on that first theme, democracy, I think, for want of a better word, sort of localism and engagement, role of elected members?
Robert, it's Sarah O'Brien. I mean, it's kind of on that, but it's probably a general comment. I think for me, the reassuring thing from my group and from everything I'm picking up on the chat, not one person questioned the importance of place or engagement at place, or that was needed. So, you know, we've said this before, and Alan said it, you know, place is the building block of the partnership. And the fact that what I think I've heard all morning is that nobody's questioning that, I think puts us in a really good place to move this forward and to build on that.
Thank you, Sarah. That's great. Thank you. Okay, let's move on to the, as I said, probably most of the comments were around what I call design, i.e. the design of the partnership, its interfaces with all the other bodies, whether or not it's SDP rebadged or an SHA rebadge, and really down to some quite fundamental, almost sort of existential questions. You know, who decided Cheshire and Merseyside? Why another structure? And I guess kind of through the haze of that, there's an underlying question which came out in the chat. I noticed Beatrice Frankel mentioned a few times. Now, how do we really understand the value, add the value? I know you touched on that earlier, Alan, but you know, it's sort of fine. I guess the sentiment would be, you know, fine to state that we want to add value, but how do we do that? How do we measure that and not be just another bit of the infrastructure? So there's something there about the the design of the whole the partnership and how it interrelates with everything else. You touched on the statutory point earlier, Alan, I know, but I think the concern here is about the potential for noise, sort of white noise and complexity in the system. That's probably at the heart of that, and whether that we're designing in more complexity than is warranted.
I'll carry on trying to answer these questions then. Who decided Cheshire and Merseyside? As I understand it, Cheshire and Merseyside did. It's before my time, but that's my understanding. Cheshire and Merseyside decided Cheshire and Merseyside. I'm regaled with stories about a meeting at Aintree Racecourse that came to that conclusion, but it came from the collection of organisations that are involved in this discussion. That's how it arrived. a mention of health and wellbeing boards, and I think that's a very helpful mention. And certainly, one of my ambitions is that the partnership connects better with health and wellbeing boards. And there had been an arrangement where NHSEI attended health and wellbeing boards. We've just agreed that it will be the partnership now that attends health and wellbeing boards. So that's likely to be me and Jackie over the next short while. And those responsible for those, if you'd like to invite us, we're very, very keen to come. In terms of, I keep making this subsidiarity point and about adding value, and Beatrice's question is a good one about what is value. The value we've determined, and I was trying to assert in my presentation what are the values that we purport to have, and those are those 8 things that we want to measure. So practically, how might we do about this, rather than just being a piece of infrastructure? There are funds for developments, for initiatives, for programs of work, and they need to be redetermined for next year about what are those priorities. They need to be tested against those questions, and I talked about those questions being turned into the criteria that we would apply to proposals for programs that we would then apply, and the partnership will have a look at those criteria, and the partnership assembly will look at those criteria, and the partnership assembly will also look at the outcome of the application of those criteria as well. So how will we judge? How will we value? We'll apply those criteria, and then we'll determine between us whether it's working for us.
That's very good, Alan. And sort of mixed up in that question, and this is clearly not just a question for you, it's a question for everybody really, but a few comments sort of in that about whether this is all a little bit too NHS-y rather than broader than that.
I'm in danger of feeling the need to answer every question, and I must resist it. That's the whole point of starting with place.
Yeah.
That it's not NHS-y.
Okay, very good. And would Jackie or any of the place leads like to add anything on that, what I call design and potential for complexity?
I think on the design side, what we're trying to create are some structures and fora whereby we can engage with places and wider across the system in terms of designing how we work and where we focus our work, and particularly with relevance to the ICP network and the programs. So we're all very keen to emphasize the co-design that we want to achieve by this partnership, and it will be the sum of its parts in terms of its outputs, but we've not developed sufficient fora to engage on that basis at the moment. As I've told you, there's a couple of things in train, but that is the intention, and the health and wellbeing boards are another addition to that, and there'll be more. So where it's at all possible, we will engage and be in amongst the partnership and place system and places in order to listen to how we should shape the partnership moving forward and its priorities.
Thank you, Jackie.
Robert, it's Fiona Taylor. I wonder if one of the things interesting in the small chat room group is how we communicate in plain English what the partnership means to the place. So if you're Mrs. Smith that's living in the middle of Boople, what is this partnership going to do for you? What does it mean? And I think that's where we may need to perhaps do a bit more work on that thinking and that communication, because otherwise it becomes all about health and the NHS, and it's all about the people who live in a place, and what we do is contributing players, whether that's community voluntary sector, statutory sector, to support and get the energy to support our communities with the health needs, with our intelligence that we know, which often comes through our public health teams in the local authorities. So it's how we perhaps describe that I think is a fundamental issue for us here. Otherwise, we're going to be talking different languages with different cultures, and it doesn't mean anything to people in the middle of Cheshire or Liverpool, wherever. So I think we really need to focus on how we can articulate that better. Because even the people on this assembly today, there's so many different concepts of what we're trying to get to. I think we need to drill it down to its lowest common denominator.
Thank you, Fiona. And just to move us on, because I'm very conscious of time, don't want to keep you beyond the half hour. The final two areas were around what I call direction and digital. Direction being essentially about direction of resources. You know, where do we put effort? Where do we prioritize? How do we align with local plans, local initiatives? And of course, part of that resource allocation and direction would, one assume, be around sort of digital resources, and to avoid this this phenomenon of digital exclusion again, which has come up quite a few times in the chat. So again, Alan and colleagues, maybe a brief word on those two themes just before we begin to enter the final phase of our session today.
Robert, do you want me to?
Yeah,
yeah. We had quite a lively debate on that one in our group, and I think the point was well made that a lot of the stuff that we've had to do around using digital platforms to enable connections to services, healthcare and otherwise, and even simple things like buying food online, has proved challenging to people. And there's not only the training and equipment issue, but there's sometimes a choice issue. Some people choose not to engage with that kind of technology. And what one of the thoughts that we did have there was what could we do at scale to almost make a baseline offer across our communities, so that we can treat it almost like a utility and get a basic level of availability, and perhaps use that any effectiveness or efficiency we bring to our offers in place to free up the time to help focus on those groups who perhaps have made different choices, don't want to engage, and recycle some of that free time to help support them to get equitable access to care, rather than it just being a means to an end in itself.
Yeah, very good. Thank you, Andy. So thank you for all of that. Obviously, very, very rich feedback there, and we've captured quite a lot of it. I guess we can do a fuller summary and send it round to you after the session. But for now, I'm going to move us to the last sort of phase. And Izzy, if you could bring up the next the slide after this one, in fact. And we'll just go into a kind of closing piece. I alluded to this right at the beginning, you know, these two kind of sides of the give and take, I suppose, between individuals and the partnership, or places in the partnership. So perhaps I can invite you in the chat function. I'll write the first question in here. Here we go. What I can do for my place is, or places where you cover more than one place. Can I invite you to write in the chat box how you might kind of respond to that, what I can do for my place is, and we'll just allow that to run and scroll for a couple of minutes before we add in the second question. What I can do for my place is. Thank you. And I can see some responses coming in straight away. And you can read those as they come in. What I can do for my place is. So we've got a comment about places to nominate its lead, remaining positive, strengthen place governance. Let's have a few more. Make sure we travel together. Thank you, Simon. Thank you, David. David O'Hagan, that is. Need to clarify clarity that place is the only legitimate route for decision making. Yes, very good. Thank you. Great. So lots of thoughts and comments coming in here. And as I said at the beginning, this session's being recorded and we can save the chat as well. So we can return that to you for you to consider at greater length. Yeah, I won't read all of these out, obviously, because you can see them yourselves. But there's a lot about working collaboratively, about support, good communication, hearing voices from across the piece, putting citizens at the heart of all we do. Okay, very good. So Please keep your answers coming, and I'll also put up the second question, which is kind of the converse, I guess, of the first one, which is, okay, you're answering the question now, what I can do for my place. I guess slightly Churchillian, this, isn't it? Ask not what you can do for your country, etc. Let's put up the second question, but also what I need from other partners is. So I'm typing that in the chat box here. What I need from other partners is. So this is a kind of give and take question. There's something you can give and maybe something you can have in return. What do you need from other partners? And again, you can read these comments yourself. Commitment, listening, continuous collaborative partnership, authenticity, better communication channels. And as those are coming in, Alan, maybe I can just pass back to you to begin to close out the meeting, and we can have the next slide. Izzy, please.
Thank you. I'm slightly baffled by the
yes,
the messages coming in and the mistake of trying to read them with the speed they're coming in.
Yeah.
But one of the things that does is illustrate the wealth of contribution and the wealth of the people that we've got making those contributions. I've found the conversation we've had this morning very encouraging. I'd like to thank people for those. I think that notion that we have a community of interest, we have a sense of direction of the things we're trying to do, has been quite consistently supported. And that's in terms of the aims around health and well-being, around inequalities, around working together. But it's also been, because of the emphasis of the theme, around place. And I think that's been really helpful. I hope one of the things we've established, without a shadow of a doubt, is place is the fundamental building block as far as the partnership's concerned. And many of the messages are that the partnership needs to demonstrate that. I think needs to demonstrate it by the choices it makes around investment, the choices it makes in terms of how it organises itself, the choices it makes in what it measures, and so on. With the absolute, I've forgotten who it was, made the point that there wasn't a dissenting voice in the groups about place being central. I think it might have been Sarah. And with that ringing endorsement, it strengthens our ability as the leaders of the partnership, and particularly it strengthens the arm of the executive, to start to make decisions much more on that basis, and for them to understand they will be supported in doing so. And that in itself is enormously helpful. So what will we be doing next? Well, very simple things, like there'll be a record of this meeting, all of the slides will go on the microsite, and you'll get a message to tell you when they've gone on the microsite. But we intend to use the microsite as a reference point for this community of interest, and therefore you'll find updates and so on. We will, as I said, be moving on to further work on governance arrangements, and again, a great deal of colour and a great deal of content been provided to enable us to make those choices and be more assertive about them, and resist some of the resistors when we've had such an emphatic support for the notion of place and the centrality of place. We'll be moving on to a review of the programmes, and we'll be reviewing those against the criteria I described. And you will have seen, I hope, through this session, how you will be involved in that and able to influence it, both in terms of the criteria and in terms of their application. So I hope you'll see that from my point of view, and I hope from yours, this has been very, very helpful in giving us absolute clarity about the centrality of place. Thank you for that. thank you for the contributions, and thanks what you do largely in place as well that makes a difference to the population of Cheshire and Merseyside.